So we have our community workshop, which is identical to the one we did this past Saturday. So I will turn it over to Chair Martone so you can get this workshop started.
Thank you. Yes, this is a Pajaro Valley Fire Protection District. This is a community workshop, educational workshop regarding our dissolution and potential merger with CSA 48 County Fire. I'd like to introduce myself, Dave Martone. I am the board chair. My vice chair is Jake Delamonica. James Allen, assistant chief, Cal Fire, Santa Cruz, San Mateo. Jed Wilson, fire chief for Santa Cruz, San Mateo Ranger Unit, and also the Pajaro Valley Fire Chief. And Mike Urbani is the battalion chief with Cal Fire and also our battalion chief here at Pajaro Valley. I'd also like to recognize the 3 board members on our board who are not here tonight. That is Bob Hervey, Ashley Moles, and John Sampson. So the ground rules are, this is going to be a maximum of 2 hours. The presentation will take about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session of up to 1 hour, 30 minutes. We'll try and keep it to 3 minutes per speaker on the first round. If time remains, we can do another round. The rules for engagement, well, we had speaker cards, but that's not going to work here. So
they'll raise their hand.
And Executive Director Joe Serrano with LAFCO is also present. Sorry, and Kimberly Finley, who is the
Director of GSD,
Director of General Services for the County of Santa Cruz. Mr. Serrano will mediate the questions and handle all that.
And Chair, before you keep moving forward, you're correct. So last Saturday we did speaker cards. This time around we will allow the community, and I hear an echo from your end, just different. But residents can submit their questions in the Q&A, and also at the end of the workshop they can raise their hand and we'll answer their questions at the end of our presentation. So there's 2 ways for them to provide us questions, and we'll address them accordingly. So that's the subtle difference between the workshop in person and this virtual workshop. So thank you for letting me clarify that.
Very good, thank you. And also we're just requesting the professionalism at all times, and no outbursts will be tolerated. And also if you're the members of the public, will be addressing the board or the members on the panel and not addressing the public. And thank you. This meeting is to discuss the PV Fire future and not to discuss 90 Middle Road. There will be no best questions addressed at all. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Director Delamonica to do a presentation about the history of the fire district.
Good evening. So currently within the Pajaro Valley Fire Protection District, it covers 52 square miles, approximately 18,000 residents, and 1,600 calls for service per year. The current staffing is 1 battalion chief, 1 deputy fire marshal, 3 fire captains, 4 engineers, and the engine is currently staffed with 2 to 3 personnel daily. So a brief history of Pajaro Valley Fire. So pre-1994, there were 2 districts that covered the Pajaro Valley region. You have the South Sequoias Fire District and the Freedom Fire District. Both South Sequoias and Freedom consisted of 1 fire chief, 3 fire captains, and 20 plus paid call firefighters at approximately $8 per call. For the South Sequoias Fire Protection District, the fire tax was $66 per unit, and the Freedom tax was $33 per unit, or single family equivalency. In 1994, Freedom Fire District attempted Measure B, which was a benefit assessment, and it failed. In 1994, the consolidation of the two districts occurred. That was based on the LAFCO recommendation, and that formed the Par Valley Fire under a JPA. Between 1994 and 1996, Pajaro Valley increased staffing by adding 6 new engineers between the two stations. They were stipend positions at $1,200 a month. In 1996, Pajaro Valley Fire attempted a Measure B, which was another benefit assessment. It passed. So essentially what Measure B was because Freedom Fire was paying $66, or South Sequoias was paying $66 per unit, and Freedom was paying $33 per unit. They basically merged it together within the district, and everyone dropped down to $33. So the South Sequoias Fire District fire taxes was cut in half. Currently it generates roughly $142,000 a year in fire tax. In 1996, it generated approximately $172,000 annually. The reason it's dropped approximately $30,000 is because of annexations from the city of Watsonville. So we basically lost part of our districts. So in 1997, Pajaro Valley Fire entered into a cooperative agreement with CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE provided administration, staffing, training, dispatch services, and operational oversight. A board was elected to maintain local governance. The Freedom Fire Station was closed, and the excess Pajaro Valley Fire employees were absorbed into either CAL FIRE and the city of Watsonville. The staffing out here at the South Sequoia Station was 1 battalion chief, 1 fire captain, 3 engineers, and 2 firefighter 2s. We had half a fire marshal and half a dispatch. There was 2 people on the engine, and we maintained an active paid call firefighter program. In 2003, Pajaro Valley Fire attempted a bond measure to build a fire station. That failed. In 2007, the paid call firefighter positions were eliminated, allowing us to add 2 firefighter 1 positions to allow us to increase the staffing to 3 personnel on the engine daily. In 2014, CAL FIRE removed the firefighter 1 positions from Schedule A contracts. So Pajaro Valley added 2 additional FAA positions to maintain 3 personnel daily on the engine. In May of 2018, Pajaro Valley Fire attempted a tax override. It was going to be $75 for single-family residents. There was a mail response that was sent out that was at 66 or 64% was in support. So this survey was conducted through SCI Consulting Group. It was to increase $75 on top of the $33 already applied to single-family residences. Again, it needed 2/3 vote to pass. The sole purpose of this tax override was to maintain 3 people or 3 personnel per day on the engine. The survey was sent to all residents within the district. 7,193 surveys were mailed out. In June of 2018, only 580 surveys were returned. That's 8% of the mailers were returned by the voters. 64 was yes, 36%, or I'm sorry, 64 said yes, and 36% said no. We need 66.7 to pass. Based on the SCI report and the roughly $35,000 needed to run a ballot measure, the board decided not to proceed. In 2023, the Pajaro Valley Fire Board sent a letter to the Board of Supervisors requesting additional Prop 172 funds. The board never received any response back from the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors. In 2024, Pajaro Valley attempted a 218 ballot measure to increase to $160 for a single family residence. That failed. 46% were yes and 54% were no. So that $160 for that SFE on that 218 would have added an additional $1 million to maintain 3-person staffing. It did not include capital outlay, which includes apparatus and equipment and infrastructure. It was just to keep the 3 people on the engine. In July of 2024, after the 218 ballot measure failed, we decreased the personnel or decreased the staffing to only 2 people on the engine per day. In 2025, the Pajaro Valley Board voted to consider reorganization with CSA 48. In June of 2025, the board received a proposal for a 218. And there was a LAFCO ad hoc committee work with consultants. The proposal was $206 per single family residence. That 206 would have generated $1.3 million annually. It would have maintained 3 people on the engine and included the capital outlay. The 218 report was received in October of 25 from SCI, the consulting group. The concerns were raising fee amounts, tax fatigue, the weighted impact of a Proposition 218, and voter participation. In 2026, or in March of 2026, the board directs staff to provide a report on request for proposal feasibility study. We received that report from staff. It was presented on March 8th of 2026. So for comparison, CAL FIRE, the current contract, would have been $2.7 million. Watsonville would be 3.4, and Central Fire Santa Cruz County was $3.8 million. So that's kind of where we are now.
Right, so we did a comparative study, like Director Belmont has said. CAL FIRE was the best option for us. Our goal right now is to return to 3 personnel on the engine, maintain the infrastructure and our vehicle and equipment replacement. The PV board is committed to move forward with reorganization into Santa Cruz County Fire Department, or CSA 48, and working with Santa Cruz County and LAFCO, we hope to accomplish that. We understand that in preliminary talks with the county, they commit to maintaining all Pajaro Valley Fire District existing agreements and contracts. And we are convinced that organization into CSA 48 and Santa Cruz County Fire is our only option to provide the best fire protection for our constituents. At this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Executive Director Serrano with LAFCO to discuss some things. You're muted.
Joe, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Again, my name is Joe Serrano. I'm the Executive Officer for the Local Agency Formation Commission, better known as LAFCO. For those that are not familiar, LAFCO is a local government that oversees the boundaries of cities and special districts. So in other words, we determine who's the most logical provider of public services. And when I say public services, I mean water, sewer, park and rec, or in this case, fire protection and emergency medical services. And when I say providers, I mean cities and special districts. So cities, for example, the city of Watsonville, it has its own water department, fire department. They are an entity that provides multiple services. They have their own boundary. For the PV community, you live in unincorporated county territory, so you get your services through special districts. So they specialize in typically one service. So for example, for those that are living in the Freedom area, the Freedom County Sanitation District provides sewer service to that area. And specifically for the PV community, you get your fire protection from the Pajaro Valley Fire Protection District. And again, it has its own jurisdictional boundaries, and LAFCO oversees those boundaries. And if there's any modifications, any changes, the agency has to go through the LAFCO process. So I'm tasked today to cover 2 things for you this evening. One is to go over the LAFCO process, specifically what has been accomplished since submitting an application to LAFCO, where we're at now, and where we may be in the near future in this application should it move forward. And then the second half of my presentation will be to cover frequently asked questions that I've heard from your neighbors, as well as questions that I've heard when there's a significant change like a reorganization, which is, again, we're proposing to dissolve PV Fire, so that goes away, but then that area is now being served by CSA 48. So there's a lot of questions associated to that type of change. And this evening, I want to cover some frequently asked questions. So that's where we're going to cover this evening. And again, after we're done with the presentations, then we're going to open the floor for Q&A. So this is a timeline that goes over the statutory requirements when an agency submits an application to LAFCO. So again, PV Fire, you heard the history, they determined that the best way to provide services to its constituents is through this reorganization. So they submitted an application to LAFCO back in April of 2025, so last year. And typically, when you get an application, there's a number of different documents that LAFCO requires in order to deem the project complete and for it to move forward. Right now, the application is pending because there's some items missing, specifically a will serve letter from the county. Again, they operate CSA 48. That will serve letter is another way of saying that the county is willing and capable of providing services to the community. We have not received that, and that's on purpose. The county has made it clear that they want to know, or they want to get reassurance that the community is fully aware about this proposal. They want to make sure that this is not perceived as a county takeover or this is a way to get more money from the PV community. That's not the intent. Again, the PV Fire Board has determined that this is the best way to provide services to your neighborhood. And so they're the one that initiated the process. But again, the county and LAFCO determined that we need to inform the residents about this proposal before we move forward. So we received an application in April 2025. Those next 6 to 8 months, the board has discussed not only the reorganization effort, but a parallel approach. At that time, last year, they were still considering maybe staying as an independent fire district and getting additional funds to be sustainable. As you heard, there's been multiple failures in benefit assessments or special taxes. But again, they were looking at that as an alternative approach. There's a SCI consulting report that showed the cost per parcels. Based on that cost, the PV Fire Board during that time last year determined that reorganization still seems like the best option for the community. So that leads to February of 2026, earlier this year. Once LAFCO heard that PV Fire was going to move forward with this reorganization effort, we wanted to do a fiscal analysis to determine, is there enough funds to cover the anticipated expenses should CSA 48 assume this new responsibility? So that report showed that in order for this to work, this reorganization to work, CSA 48's existing benefit assessments, they currently have 2, would need to be extended to the community. And based on those 2 assessments, with the property taxes that's being collected by PV Fire, that's enough revenue to cover the anticipated expenditures between now and the next 5 years. Again, LAFCO, when we look at changes of governance, we want to make sure that it is sustainable, not just for the next few years, but in perpetuity. So that was a good indicator that this idea, this concept makes sense financially. And we'll talk about the specific costs momentarily, but that is something that we determined that we wanted to provide that information to the residents. So that report is available online on the PV Fire website as well as LAFCO. And again, we'll talk about those documents momentarily. But then that leads to this month. So as you can see, it's been a year since the initial application was submitted to LAFCO. And now you're getting this information. So this is going to be a multi-year process. That's by design. We want to make sure that this is not perceived as something that's being done, back doors, or this is being bulldozed to you. We want to make sure that this is a process that is thorough and transparent. And these workshops, the one that we had this past weekend on Saturday and what we're having tonight, They're not required by law, but LAFCO determined that this is a form of good government. We want to make sure that the residents are aware of this process and are aware of all the supporting documents available. And in order to do so, we wanted to have discussions with you directly, give you an opportunity to learn about this and ask questions. We had a somewhat good turnout on Saturday. I know it was a holiday weekend, but we also wanted to have that open for people that weren't able to attend. So we're having this virtual meeting today, and this is being recorded. So even if your neighbors weren't able to attend this meeting, it'll be accessible to them. And again, it's by design. We want to be transparent. So now that we're having this discussion now, and there's data for you to review, what are the next steps in this reorganization process? So as I mentioned earlier, there's still items missing in order for LAFCO to deem the project complete. One of them is a will-serve letter from the county, pretty much committing that they are open to this idea, they're willing and they're capable of providing services. And I think once we have this discussion with the community and once you're aware of it, the next step is to request that document from the county. And I will point out that this has been a collaborative effort between PV Fire, the county, CAL FIRE, and LAFCO. So we are all working together to make sure that is this the best way to provide services to the community? And as of right now, we've all agreed that this is the best approach. I will say that the county is not thrilled at this idea of taking on new responsibilities, but it's again, the right thing to do because we want to make sure that when you call 911, someone shows up. And we just talked about the fact that you went from 3 people on duty down to 2, and that is below the standard. So we want to make sure that you're getting adequate services. And this is something that we all agree that this reorganization can help you get the best level of service possible. So let's assume that we get all the supporting documents. LAFCO will then deem the project complete. And that's when LAFCO staff, including myself, so you're looking at 50% of LAFCO staff, we're a small team, will present this reorganization to our commission and its local leaders. So we have an 11-member board. So it's 3 board of supervisors, 3 city council members, 3 special district board members, and 2 members of the public. And so instead of asking for a boundary change from Sacramento, like other states in the nation do, we have local leaders. So there's 1 LAFCO in each county in California. So 58 LAFCOs, 58 counties. So we're going to present this reorganization, assuming we deem it complete, to our board. And if they approve it, there's 2 specific proceedings that must follow by state law. The first one is a 30-day request for reconsideration. This is an opportunity for anyone in the county to say, LAFCO, you need to reconsider your approval because you did not see this new evidence. So again, this is an opportunity for members of the public to request reconsideration to the commission should it get approved. After those 30 days, there is a protest proceeding. So this is an opportunity for the residents within PV Fire to submit petitions of opposition. So if you oppose this reorganization for whatever reason, you have an opportunity to submit petitions. And the rule of thumb is this: if LAFCO receives less than 25% of landowners or registered voters in opposition, then we move forward with the reorganization. But if we get more than 25% and less than 50%, that triggers a special election. So that'll be a mailed-in election ballot. So you'll receive a ballot and you will vote yes or no for this reorganization, should we meet that threshold. And if we receive more than 50% of the affected residents opposing this reorganization, then it terminates the whole process. So it behooves this group, meaning the county, PV Fire, CAL FIRE, LAFCO, and the residents, to be on the same page, to make sure that this is a benefit to your neighborhood. So you have the final say. We can go through this process, but the residents have an opportunity to oppose it for whatever reason. But again, this is why we're having this discussion now, and we will continue having this discussion so that way you're informed about the entire process. Assuming that protest proceeding doesn't garner any special election or termination, then that's where LAFCO will make sure that everything has been addressed, and then we will present the protest results to our commission, and afterwards we'll record. So the date of recordation is the day that PV Fire no longer exists, and the PV community is now receiving services from CSA 48. And so we're anticipating that will occur in February of 2027, so a year from now. These dates are subject to change, but this gives you a better idea of the process. Again, it's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of steps that we need to go through, a lot of legal hoops that we need to jump through. But that, again, is by design because we want to make sure that you are informed about this reorganization and we have an opportunity to have this type of dialogue. So I know this is a lot of information, but this gives you a better understanding of the LAFCO process. This PowerPoint presentation is going to be available online as well as this recording. But I really want to go over frequently asked questions that I've heard so far from your residents or from your neighbors, as well as during my time as a LAFCO employee. So I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. And there has been an uptick in fire-related reorganizations and consolidations, not only in our county, but statewide. And I will just note that in Santa Cruz County, we just had a reorganization a few years ago in the Valley area with Branson 40 Fire merged with Scottsdale Fire. A couple of years later, prior to that, we had a consolidation with Central Fire and Aptos Selva. So we're seeing these type of changes in our own county. So why is that? Why are you being proposed a change in your fire protection? Why is PV Fire going away and CSA 48 taking over? Well, it's because PV Fire can no longer afford providing this type of service. And this is not a PV Fire problem. It's not even a state problem. It's a nationwide problem. It's very expensive to operate a fire district. And as you heard earlier from your board representative, the district can no longer afford a 3-person on duty model, and they had to go down to 2 in order to be sustainable. It's my understanding if you would have stayed at a 3 level, and the panel can correct me, is you would continue to use reserves, and at some point you were going to run out of money. So in order to stay sustainable, we went down to 2 people on duty. Even that model is going to be tough to be sustainable. I think that we're going to have an issue in the next few years about the fiscal stability of PV Fire if you stay with this current model. So again, it's very expensive, and that's why this is being proposed, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you get the best level of service possible. And for LAFCO's point of view, if that service is for PV Fire, great. But if that's not sustainable, we need to look at alternatives, which leads to our next question that I've been hearing. It's what's wrong with the status quo? As I mentioned, you are down to 2 people on duty, which is below the national safety standards. And so when you call 911, you anticipate a team to show up. And that's not the case. You only get 2 people. And one thing that I think about is with the national standards, is you have to have 2 people inside a burning fire, and you have to have 2 people out. But in today's world, fire is not the number 1 cause that fire districts get. It's more medical related. So when you're having some medical issues, especially like in the windy roads in the PV community, and there's a car accident, you want to make sure that you have a team to show up to administer any type of medical emergencies, and 2 people can only do so much. So that's the crux of this situation, is that the standard is below the national standard that we're seeing. That should be above the adequate service that you're currently receiving. The next question that we hear is, what will change under this reorganization? So the goal is to go back to at least having 3 people on duty. And under the CSA 48 model, you'll have at least 3 people on duty on any given shift, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is the goal of this reorganization. We'll also remove a layer of governance. So you'll no longer have that PV Fire board, but you'll have representation from CSA 48. But again, we're really looking at the service. We want to make sure that you're getting adequate level of service. Nothing changes with the fire station. Nothing changes with the apparatus, because what's interesting is PV Fire receives services through a contract with CAL FIRE. CSA 48 has a similar model. They get their services from CAL FIRE as well. But again, with the 3 people on duty minimum crew. The most or frequently asked question that I've been hearing from the PV Fire community, as well as during my 18 years of working with LAFCO, is how much is this going to cost me? And why can't we just stay as an independent fire district? Why can't we just collect funds ourselves and stay independent? We don't want to be part of the county. And so that's fair questions. And so residents under this reorganization will pay the same benefit assessment structure that CSA 48 constituents are currently paying. So as I mentioned earlier, there's 2 benefit assessments under CSA 48. That would be extended in this reorganization to the PV community. As your board representatives mentioned earlier, PV Fire has attempted to receive additional revenues, but that was unsuccessful. And that's something that it's the reality of today is it's difficult to get funding from anybody right now. It's just the economy where we're at right now. It's difficult. And so this is something that we want to address. So what we've done is we've provided information online so you can check to see how much exactly would it cost you your parcel should this reorganization move forward. And I think, and the panel can correct me, but I believe the average would be around $367 for single family home units. And that's what's being proposed under this organization. But again, if you want to know exactly how much is going to be charged to your parcel, if you go to the LAFCO website or the PV Fire website, you can get access and you'll know exactly how much would be asked of you as part of this reorganization. But again, I want to mention, we're not asking you to pay more just to pay more. You are paying for an enhanced level of service. Right now, with your $33 a year, you're getting 2 people on duty. With this additional funding, you'll get at least 3 people on duty on any given shift. And lastly, what I've been hearing is, what if we oppose this, or what if this reorganization fails? What happens then? If that does occur, then the status quo will remain. You will continue to receive services from PV Fire, and you'll have 2 people on duty. But again, this is not a sustainable model, and we may have to come back in the near future to try this reorganization again. And what's significant is right now, the county and CSA 48 are open to the idea of merging with PV Fire or taking over responsibility. That may not be the case down the road. Right now, PV Fire is not underwater. It's not bankrupt, but we don't want to be in a position where you are on the verge of bankruptcy and you run out of money, and then you're looking for alternatives. That we want to prevent that from happening. And right now, you're in a position where you could have these dialogues with CSA 48 and LAFCO to determine what's best for the community. So if it fails, if the residents determine that you do not want to support the reorganization, then the status quo will remain. But just keep in mind, we may have this conversation down the road, and any type of leverage or the ability to have certain conditions in place may not be available if we wait that long. So those are the frequently asked questions that LAFCO has been hearing, or I've heard in my 18 years. But you may have some questions that I did not address or we have not covered in the presentation, and we really want to hear from you. This is the whole reason why we're having this workshop, because we want to hear from the residents, hear your concerns, hear your questions, and just reassure you that this is going to be a transparent effort. We want to make sure that you are heard throughout the process. We want to make sure we address your questions accordingly and provide you all the information. So what we'll do now is we'll open up the floor for Q&A unless the panel has any additional points that they want to raise. I do see a question on the Q&A box, so I'll address that one first. But if you have any questions, either drop it in the Q&A box or raise your hand. And there's a raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. So if you can click on that, we'll address your questions. Again, we're here for, I believe, like another hour or so. So again, this is for you. So I'm going to address the first question, which says, if protests trigger an election, who pays for that election? When would it happen? And what happens to fire service while that process plays out? Really good question. So if a protest is triggered if a mail-in election is triggered through the protest proceedings, the applicant is typically responsible for that cost. So in that case, it would be PV Fire, but we would coordinate with the applicant to address those expenditures. When would that happen? So that's where LAFCO will coordinate with PV Fire on the timeline of that mail-in election. Again, we're not going to wait for a general election or the primaries. This is something that we can conduct at any point in the calendar year, because again, it's going to be a mailed-in ballot that's submitted to the PV residents. So that's something that we will address should we need to conduct a mail-in election in results to the protest proceedings. So that's a good question. Another question I see here is, will there only be EMTs on the engine? I'll defer to PV Fire or Chief Wilson if you can answer that question of, will there be only EMTs on the engine?
Ruth, currently right now, we have medical first responder or EMRs and EMTs. We're looking at having only EMTs on the engines moving forward in a new agreement for the 27-28 fiscal year. 26-27, excuse me. And then should this reorganization move forward, it does give us bandwidth to look at other medical services to see if those are warranted. And one thing to note is in Santa Cruz County, our EMTs are advanced EMTs, so they're able to do things that other EMTs and other LEMSAs are not able to do with some advanced interventions, which is extremely helpful.
Thank you, Chief. And that you may have to answer this question as well. It says, can you break down the county fire operational support costs?
Yes, Randy, I can do that for you. So what we did for the county fire operational support costs, which I'm assuming you're looking at in the table that was provided, that's $231,554. So currently under county fire, we have an assistant chief, a battalion chief, a forestry assistant, a public information officer, a full-time analyst, and a comm operator in the ECC. So we looked at how to mathematically spread that cost should Pajaro Valley Fire become part of the CSA 48 family. And we looked at that based on call volume, population served, the geographical square mileage served, a number of parcels, and the number of stations. And when we mathematically took an average of those, we reached around approximately 17% of that overall cost, which calculated out to that $231,000 towards Pajaro Valley. Some of the benefits of that for those positions is you're going to have the additional operational oversight. But currently Pajaro Valley does not have a public information officer. So you'll be able to have press releases, social media, etc., that currently is done for county fire. The forestry assistant too could work with the ranch and landowners on vegetation management projects that currently is not happening within the Pajaro Valley Fire District. You'd have an additional 1.5 positions for the deputy fire marshal. So currently Pajaro Valley pays for 0.5 of a fire marshal. So you'd have 2 fire marshals along with CSA, combining with CSA 48 for more efficiency throughout the week. And then the comm operator, it would be added from county fire to Pajaro Valley for the number of calls. And there's a plethora of other benefits of those, but that's mathematically how we figured out that calculation. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Chief. Go ahead. Oh, so we got a few more questions. So I'm going to go with the next one, which says, what mechanisms exist to prevent organizational expansion and administrative growth from consuming the same financial flexibility being used to justify consolidation? I may need assistance from the panel, but I'll take a stab at this question. So under this reorganization, CSA 48 would be the successor agency. So they will be providing services to PV community. CSA 48 is the service provider for the rural area of the county. So we have fire districts in the Valley region as well as the urban region. So if CSA 48 were to consider any type of boundary change or expansion, through annexation, that will require LAFCO action. So it will be an additional process with an additional evaluation and analysis by LAFCO and the applicant. So that's something that by law, CSC 48 would need to exercise should they look at any type of expansion. So that hopefully answers your question. Now, when it comes to the financial flexibility, one question that I've been hearing from residents that we didn't address is with the projections, there is a carryover amount from revenues over expenditures. And what happens if, in fact, there is a surplus or carryover amount? What happens to those funds? And so right now, the affected parties and LAFCO are looking at perhaps establishing specific reserves to ensure that any carryover amount is saved under that PV community reserve balance. So that's something that we're looking at as well to make sure that those funds are captured accordingly. So hopefully that answers your question. We have another question about why is the CSC 48 allowing a 5% annual increase for operational support costs when other annual increases are 3%? Now, Chief Wilson, you may provide assistance. I'm hearing an echo from your end.
I think Director Maratone wanted to go back to the previous question before we answer the 5% question.
I just want to say that we're negotiating with the county. We had an ad hoc LAFCO committee, which has got us to this point. We dissolved that, and we're now going to, once we get the will serve letter, where we have this ad hoc committee that is the reorganization committee, and those will be working diligently with the county and LAFCO to list out all the things that we think are really important and get those set in stone, which would be 3.0 staffing, maintain equipment, maintain the station, and all the like. So we feel pretty confident that LAFCO is going to make sure that in the end that all these things are signed and for perpetuity maintain our station as we want it to be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chief, did you want to address the 5% annual increase for operational supporting costs and while other expenditures were only 3%?
Yes, so for budgeting purposes, for the 5% increases are related to the CAL FIRE agreements, so the contract with CAL FIRE. And anytime that CAL FIRE enters a multi-year agreement with an agency, it is a 5% escalator every year on that agreement. So if it's a 5-year agreement, it's a 25% over the course of the life of that contract. One thing that's unique with CAL FIRE is we bill actual. So we're not going to bill if your contract is for $2 million 1 year and we only utilize 1.7 million, that's what we charge you. There's other contracting agencies out there, they charge you the $2 million flat. You just write a straight check for that contract. So we add the 5% escalator each year in a multi-year agreement that allows for health and wellness for our employees with increased salary or different benefits. It also provides a little bit of fluctuation and balance should the admin rate or the staff benefit rate change during those periods of time.
Right. Thanks, Chief. So we got another comment / question. So I still hear that echo on your end, just FYI, Chief. I'm looking at the LAFCO financial projections and the 2025 PV Fire SCI report. They are very similar in terms of providing 3-person staffing, the same capital outlay funds, etc. The big difference is that the LAFCO projections show the cost of CSC 48 at about $500,000 higher per year. Why do we have to pay $500,000 more per year for the same firefighters responding from the same station? It sounds like from what the chief just said, it's for administrative positions that apparently aren't needed under an independent fire protection district or PV Fire. Do I have that right? So I'll defer to.
So I'll take that one. Mr. Jarvis, mathematically, you do have that correct. There's an additional about $492,000 additional, just under $500,000 that when if the reorganization was to happen and you came to county fire, there would be those additional costs. I explained previously about the additional positions and their involvement here with the district. Another thing to think about is that you'd be part of a larger department, which would have potential impact on the ISO rating and which insurance can be based off of. And on Saturday, we discussed this, how you now have additional water tenders within the department, as Pajaro Valley has one water tender right now with 2 staffing. So it's very difficult to split the crew and take both the engine and the water tender simultaneously to a structure fire in the rural non-municipal served area. Or if you were part of county fire, there's 6 additional water tenders within the county fire fleet that are available to hopefully lower the ISO rating in the rural area, hopefully reducing insurance cost. So mathematically, yes, Mr. Jarvis, you are correct.
Thank you, Chief. So I got a comment and a question. Let's see. So it says, "Hi all, I know these numbers are based on assumptions. So I'm just trying to understand what happens if the costs come in higher than expected. If the CAL FIRE contract goes up more than we think, or the station/equipment costs are higher, who covers that gap? Is it CSA 48, the county general fund, the existing CSA 48 taxpayers, or PV fire area? Thanks." So, Chief, I'll take a first stab at this question, and I'll defer to you. But this is why LAFCO requires a financial analysis, and this is why we're having the 5-year projections analysis that is available online for the community to review. It's not required by law, but we wanted to make sure that is this option sustainable. And you're correct; these are assumptions. But they're conservative numbers. We want to make sure that there is an efficient amount of revenues to cover anticipated expenditures. And so this is something that we are, as the process unfolds, we're going to get more and more specific on the cost. So by the time we are ready to move forward, and if it does get presented to my commission and it's approved by this community, we know the numbers as close as we can. And that's why LAFCO also, as part of the application, we need a plan for service document. So it's another way of saying a transition plan to show what's the before and after. And as part of that plan for service document, it kind of shows a breakdown of the potential budgetary structure under this new successor agency. So to answer your question is, yes, we're looking at assumptions, but we're looking at potential costs, and we want to make sure that we have the existing funding sources to cover those costs. So this is something where we are working together to make sure that we present something that has the fiscal stability now and in perpetuity. Now, another question is, the county general fund or the county budget is completely separate with the CSA 48 budget. Those are 2 completely different budgets. I just want to make that one clear. And then Chief or PV Fire, I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Mr. Serrano, it looked like Miss Finley had her hand raised.
Hi, Joe. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to jump in here. Hi, Maureen. I just wanted to answer that question directly, that if our projections are off, the cost would be borne by CSA 48. CSA 48 is a completely separate entity from the county and would not pull from the general fund.
Thank you, Ms. Kimberly. All right, so there's another question in the Q&A box. What specific oversight structure will exist to ensure South County residents maintain meaningful input into future fire service spending priorities after dissolution? So that is a really good question. And this is something where your chair just mentioned about kind of identifying terms and conditions. And under LAFCO law or under state law, when LAFCO looks at any change of governance, we record a resolution. So that resolution will have terms and conditions pretty much laying out the specifics of this reorganization. What happens if PV Fire is in fact dissolved and this area is now being serviced by CSA 48? One thing that we look at is representation. So again, we talked about the PV Fire board going away. but we want to make sure that there's adequate representation of the PV fire community under CSA 48. One thing that we are considering is perhaps forming an advisory committee. This is very similar to what we did with Branson 40 Fire a few years ago when that entity was dissolved and concurrently annexed into Scotts Valley Fire. The residents didn't want to lose their voice or have the perception of losing their voice. So we, as part of that reorganization, we formed an advisory committee that had a 5-member board with representatives from that Branson 40 community. A similar approach can happen here. And so that's something that we're exploring because we want to make sure that representation it continues to be fair and adequate for as part of this reorganization. So we're looking into that. So that was a very good question. And thanks, Kimberly, for your previous response. And then we have another question in regards to please explain the $2.4 million Pajaro Valley PFD tax revenue and annual 3% annual increases. Chief, can you address that? I'm assuming it's Pajaro Valley tax revenue and the 3% annual increases. And you're muted, so I don't know if you're responding right now.
Sorry, my unmuter was taking notes. The 3% is the average CPI increase based on the Bay Area Index. So that is what we use over the average of the last couple of years. That's what it's averaged out to. So that's what the annual increase for the tax is for. That's secured and unsecured property tax.
And on that note, I also want to let the residents know that, and this was mentioned earlier about the existing special tax, the PV fire tax, the $33 a year. If this reorganization comes to fruition, that special tax will be discontinued. Because again, our intent here is to make sure that we have enough revenues to cover anticipated expenditures. And this group, PV Fire, CSA 48, CAL FIRE, and LAFCO, we determined that $33 a year special tax will not be needed should this reorganization come to fruition. So I just wanted to make that clear, that the revenue stream would primarily be those two CSA 48 assessments. Again, CSA 48 constituents are already paying those two assessments. And since if this reorganization is successful, you will now become a CSA 48 constituent as well. And then the existing property taxes that are currently being collected. That does not affect your property taxes at all. So if this reorganization happens, you won't see an increase in your property taxes. The existing property taxes that are being collected will be just transferred over to CSA 48. And those are the three primary revenue sources, again, that would be enough to cover the anticipated costs should CSA 48 take over fire protection and emergency medical services. So that concludes the questions that I see in Q&A. Feel free to add. Oh, I got two more. Great. And let's see, how are we doing with time? It's 7 o'clock, so we still have, are we here until 8? Is that correct? I'm looking at the panel.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we have two more questions. So we have, what guarantees exist that future revenue increases under CSA 48 will prioritize frontline firefighters and emergency response capacity before administrative expansion? Chief, do you mind addressing this one? And you're muted.
No, I'm reading the question.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Well, for that, I mean, we're going to prioritize staffing the fire engines and serving the public over administrative expansion any time of the day. We've been doing that, looking at that here at Pajaro Valley with their current budget. So we would prioritize emergency response over administrative if we had to look at that in the future.
All right, so the next, thank you again for that, Chair, Chief. So we have another question from Don, if the annual charge for a single family home will be $376 under CSA 48 versus the 206 for the PV Fire 2025 proposal, is there a way that the additional charges will be paying could be used for something that will actually benefit us, in parentheses, like paramedics on the engine, instead of a bigger administration?
So to answer Mr. Jarvis's question, the answer is yes, that is a potential opportunity that we are already discussing. Should the process move forward and the county provide a will serve letter, myself and staff will produce an operational implementation plan with an outlook of 5 years, and we will see what type of improvements we can utilize emphasizing in the South County area.
And we have two more questions. So we have, do CSA 48 property owners pay property tax portion for revenues for county fire? I don't know. I don't have that answer off the top of my head. I don't know if the chief has a response for this question. But the same person then asks, why are some parcels not assessed anything at all? Are schools exempt? And again, I don't have that exact information in front of me, so I don't have a response. But I'll defer to the panel if we have a response, and if we don't, then we can always circle back to the residents to provide adequate information. But I'll defer to you, Chief, if you have any responses for those two questions.
I think Chair Martone will take the second question on the first question. The property tax percentage varies throughout the county on what residents pay property tax, and in the end, how it translates to either CSA 48, Pajaro Valley, or any other fire district. It's not a set specific rate for house to house across a large geographic area. And we can gather that information so it's transparent. But I think there's 12 or more different property tax percentages.
And I can answer the number 2, which is, I think you might be referring to the 218 engineers report. There are no exempt parcels, but as far as why there's some zeros there, we don't know. We have to ask the engineers. But there are supposedly no exemptions.
There are parcels that are non-taxable, which would not need an exemption because they're non-taxable. So that's what we're going to look into, see if those are truly non-taxable parcels, or if those are parcels that for somehow have slipped through an exemption.
And remember that only information we get is what the county has. So people, if they don't have current information, but we can't, if there's someone built a house illegally, we don't know that. So it's going to show up as exempt. Non-taxable.
And I'll also note that the two proposed CSA 48 assessments that's being extended as part of this reorganization to the community, those two were voted by the CSA 48 constituents. So it's been vetted. It was approved by the residents. So again, this is something that we can look into to find those specifics. But again, that has already been considered and approved by the CSA 48 constituents. We have a question of, was a side-by-side financial comparison ever publicly presented comparing a reformed PV fire funded through local assessment versus dissolution into CSA 48? The answer is yes. The February staff report that I mentioned in my timeline when LAFCO presented or published the first iteration of the 5-year projection analysis, that also included a comparison of the two existing CSA 48 assessments to each parcel owner. And then there was another column showing the hypothetical PV fire assessment should that have moved forward. Again, that was not determined to move forward, and so it wasn't voted on by the residents. But that comparison is available online. Again, it's accessible through the PV Fire website or the LAFCO website. And before we end this workshop, I will show you the LAFCO website and where you can access all these documents. But yes, there was a comparison, and that was under a LAFCO staff report that was occurred in February of this year. So good question. And we have two more. So we have, you mentioned that the county wasn't thrilled to take PV Fire on. Did I hear that correctly? If so, can you unpack that statement? Yes, so I'll answer that since I was the one that made that comment. CSA 48 provides services through to the rural area of the county. And so they, and the county, as you know, provides a number of services countywide. And so we are asking them to take on additional responsibilities. And fire protection and emergency medical services is a big deal. And so we're asking the county to take on this new responsibility. And we're lucky that the county under CSA 48 is open and is being a partner to PV Fire. That they're not required by law to go and move forward with this reorganization. When there is a change of organization and we're identifying a new successor agency, that successor agency could say no. And that's the end of that. LAFCO cannot force the county to take over fire protection for the PV community. LAFCO can't force the PV community itself to be part of CSA 48. In order for this to be successful, everyone has to be on the same page. And again, and this is just LAFCO's perspective. I'm grateful for the county to be open to this concept because they are not required to do so. But again, this is a form of good government, and they feel that they could be a partner and they could provide the service to the residents should this reorganization be successful. But good question. All right, so I'm going to answer, I'm going to see questions that we haven't heard from people. So how is the CSA 48 fire flow fee at 27.18 per fire unit and the CSA 48 rate at 172.70 calculated? What is a fire unit? And I'll defer to the chief on this one.
So, Mr. Craven, right here I have one of those two reports, which is over 100 and something pages long. It shows the mathematical equation on how those are calculated. So both of those are available on the Santa Cruz County Fire website under the CSA 48 fees. And it can, if you want some nice evening reading, there's a couple hundred pages for both that go through the mathematical equation that derives both of those units and the costing.
All right, so I see a question of, will the LAFCO commissioners here report about this action? If so, when? So in addition to the PV Fire Board discussing this reorganization, and I want to speak on behalf of the PV Fire Board, but in LAFCO's point of view, it seems like at every board meeting that they've had an agenda item on this topic. Same with the LAFCO Commission. Staff has been presenting the updates on this reorganization effort during our LAFCO meetings, which is the first Wednesdays of each month. I am scheduled to present somewhat of an update at our next meeting on June 3rd. It's actually going to be a countywide fire report that analyzes all 12 of the fire agencies in Santa Cruz County, in addition to PV Fire. And in that report, we do discuss this proposed reorganization. After that June 3rd meeting and going forward, I've been providing the commission a fire-related update. This reorganization is not the only fire-related project that LAFCO is working on. There's other fire-related projects happening in parallel to this reorganization. So again, this is not an isolated situation. There's other fire agencies that are exploring alternatives to the status quo. But to answer that question, LAFCO will be providing an update to this commission, to my commission, on June 3rd. And typically you'll see an update on the LAFCO agenda on the first Wednesday of each month. That's when we have our board meetings. All right, so let's see. So So I'm going to go in the bottom. Once PV fire is dissolved, what mechanism exists for residents to reverse the decision if CSA 48 costs, overhead, or governance outcomes fail to meet expectations? So a good question. So I'll answer this one as well. When it comes to annexations, mergers, reorganizations, consolidations, any change of organization, change of governance, once that goes through the LAFCO process and once it's recorded, that is it. You cannot unring that bell. So there is no, well, if we don't like the outcome, then can we just go back to how it was if we don't like it after a year from now? That's not how it works. Again, when LAFCO looks at a change of organization or when we form new entities, it's for the long term. It's for perpetuity. It's not something that we will just approve on a whim, or we just think it may work. It goes through a robust process because this is serious actions that are being taken. So we don't take that lightly. So if we look at this reorganization and it goes through the LAFCO process, it's vetted. The residents have an opportunity to submit petitions of opposition and it gets recorded, then we collectively determine that that's the best way to provide services to this area. So should this come to fruition and PV fire is no longer in existence, and then down the road, the community wants to have their own independent fire district, then it would have to go through the LAFCO process. And you would have to submit an application to form a new fire district. So again, there is no mechanism to revert back. So that's why we're having this conversation with the community. We want to make sure that you are fully educated and we articulate the benefits of this reorganization. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you are aware of why this is being proposed. And should we go through those legal hoops and get this to completion, that's something that it will be sustainable now in the foreseeable future. So hopefully that answered your question. All right, so I'm seeing, and I'll defer to the chair, I'm seeing the same individuals asking questions, which is, I don't see an issue with that, but I want to make sure that anyone else that's attending this meeting has an opportunity. We still are within, it's going to be 7:15, so I'm just going to continue going down the list. I'm looking at the panel, so I'm just going to continue. How can property owners appeal their assessment if they feel there is an error? I don't know the actual process.
I can go ahead and take that one, Joe, if you'd like.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Kimberly. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So the engineer's report that established CSA 48 that was prepared by SCI outlines the appeals process for appealing a assessment on your property on page 33 and 34 of that report. Additionally, above and beyond that initial appeals process, we have the Santa Cruz County Assessment Appeals Board, and that is established and the rules are determined by Santa Cruz County Code 6.8, I believe.
Thank you, Ms. Kimberly. So I got 4 other questions. What percentage of total CSA 48 fire service spending is projected to go directly to frontline operations versus administration over the next 5, 10, and 20 years?
So I'll take this question, Joe, and I would ask maybe if Mr. Hurtado could define what he considers as administration. So County Fire CSA 48 went through a master plan, and one of those things that was identified is that there was no administration or deputy or assistant chief within County Fire. So technically right now, County Fire, and this is ballpark, say County Fire's personnel budget under CSA 48 is roughly $6 million. There is currently only one assistant chief that I would consider somewhat non-operational. Everything else is what I would consider line staff or support staff for those line personnel, with one analyst, the PIO, the forestry assistant 2, the rest remain are battalion chiefs, firefighters, engineers, or fire captains or fire marshals. So right now, our administration overhead proportion is extremely small. We could look at a 5, 10, and 20-year projection, looking at growth in the county. But the master plan did not identify needing less administration. It actually identified that we needed more within county fire.
Thanks, Chief. I mean, what role does the Board of Supervisors have in all this? And I'll defer to either Ms. Kimberly or the Chief, but I will note that, as I mentioned earlier, there is statutory requirements under this reorganization process. One is, I mentioned, there needs to be a will serve letter from the affected agency, CSA 48, indicating that they're willing and capable of providing services. In addition, there needs to be a property tax exchange agreement that's adopted by the Board of Supervisors, which indicates how much of the property taxes is being collected under PV Fire and how much of that amount is going to be transferred over to CSA 48 under this reorganization. So it's my understanding that those items are going to be presented to the Board of Supervisors at a future date. Again, the county, I don't want to speak on behalf of the county, but we want to make sure that the residents are aware of this reorganization before those documents are presented to the Board of Supervisors. But to answer your question, the Board of Supervisors do play a role in this process. And one of them will be to adopt a property tax exchange agreement. And we also need to get a will serve letter from the county in regards to their willingness to provide services. Which kind of leads to a question that I also see is, why is the county fire not happy about annexing PV Fire? I don't want to speak on behalf of the county, but it's not that they're not happy. Again, this is something that they are open to considering and exploring collectively with PV Fire and with LAFCO. So the fact that they are willing to move forward with this process and provide information and data and answering questions. I mean, that to me, that's a form of good government. But we're asking CSA 48 to assume more responsibilities. So we got 2 more questions, or 3 more, and we'll go back to the top. This is the first time in this county where existing benefit assessments have been extended to new territory through this type of process. Are there any concerns about compliance to Prop 218? And I'll answer this question. This is not the first time that the county, that their existing benefit assessments are being extended. LAFCO, under state law, has the authority to extend existing revenues, including special taxes and benefit assessments. We did that we explored that for the Branson 40 Fire Reorganization. We also looked at that for the Central Aptos Selva consolidation. So that is something that is under the purview and scope of LAFCO. And this is being proposed under this reorganization. So it's not something new. This is something that LAFCOs across the state have the authority to do so. And it's within our legal parameters. So we got 2 more. Based on the way benefit is being described tonight, is LAFCO still neutrally evaluating multiple options, or has staff already concluded that reorganization into CSA 48 is the preferred outcome and is working backward from that assumption? So that's a fair point. I will note that it is not LAFCO's responsibility to determine what PV Fire does. If they want to stay as a standalone agency, that is their prerogative. If they want to look at governance options and submit an application to LAFCO, LAFCO by law needs to evaluate that application. Meaning LAFCO, cannot force this reorganization to move forward. We can't force the county to accept this reorganization. I can't force PV Fire to move forward with this. I can't force the community to not oppose it. But LAFCO is here as a facilitator. So if PV Fire has determined that this is a potential option to provide adequate services, LAFCO will entertain the idea. Now, LAFCO by law still needs to conduct its analysis. I deemed this application incomplete because I don't have everything I need to conduct my own evaluation. Once I do so, then I present my analysis to my commission, and staff will provide a recommendation. And this is why I want to hear from the residents. I want to hear your thoughts on whether or not this is a good option for your community. Based on the input that I received from the residents, in addition to the affected parties, LAFCO will conduct an analysis, and then we'll present it during a public meeting to the commission. And the commission has full discretion. They can either approve staff recommendation, they can deny staff recommendation, or they could even modify staff recommendation during that public meeting. So this is not a done deal where this reorganization is happening whether you like it or not. There are safeguards in place to ensure that if this does move forward, it meets the legal requirements. And LAFCO has not made a formal position because we don't have the information or the documents to deem it complete in order for me to start my thorough analysis that I present to my commission. So to answer your question, no, this reorganization is not a done deal. LAFCO has not said, yes, this is something that we support. We support the fact that the affected parties are working collaboratively to move this forward. And that's what LAFCO wants. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that the PV community gets the best level of service possible, whether it's from PV Fire, from CSA 48, or from someone else. That's what I am concerned about. That's what LAFCO staff is concerned about. And I don't want to speak on behalf of my commission, but I am pretty confident that's the whole point of LAFCO being in existence. We are the ones that determine who's the most logical provider. And this is, again, we're exploring this idea. It's incomplete, but again, we're having this dialogue to this community so that way everyone's informed about this proposal. So now we got two more questions. So I see Ms. Maureen again. So it says, last question for me, I promise. What exactly is the county agreeing to in the will serve letter? Is the county simply saying CSA 48 can provide service, or is it committing to specific service levels like 3-person staffing, keeping the station open, apparatus replacement, facility maintenance, and absorbing all future costs? So good question. I'll open up to Ms. Kimberly and Chief Wilson, but I will note for LAFCO's requirement under this will serve letter, by law, we need to get a clarification that the affected agency, in this case CSA 48, is willing and capable of providing services. So what does that will serve letter actually entail? That's up to the county. If the county has certain conditions that they want to apply as part of this reorganization, that's an opportunity for them to identify. But it's not set in stone. So again, this is a work in progress reorganization. So we just need to make sure that CSA 48 is willing to move forward with this process, and they can provide information that they have adequate resources to take over PV organization. But the specifics of that will serve letter, LAFCO will defer to the county if they want to provide specifics or conditions. That is up to them. And again, this is something where if at any point PV Fire no longer wants to move forward with this reorganization as the applicant, they can pull their application. Just on the flip side with the county, if for whatever reason they decide they don't want to move forward, then they can inform LAFCO. Again, LAFCO is not in a position to force either party to make this happen. But LAFCO is being the referee at this point, or the facilitator, and making sure that we are talking throughout this whole process and we're working together. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, so we are at 7:25. We have two more questions from the same individual. I'm going to look at the chair, but I'll just ask. Go ahead.
I think we'd like to go to a 3-minute, raise a hand, and Battalion Chief Urbani will recognize everyone for 3 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, if they have if someone wants to ask, we can answer these last two questions, and then we'll go to verbal questions with a 3-minute limit for the question with a response from there.
Okay. So just to reiterate, we'll answer these two questions on the Q&A box. And for any other questions moving forward, because we want to be mindful of everyone's time, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. You'll have up to 3 minutes to address the panel. And We'll inform you when you have 1 minute left and when your time is up. So we'll address these last two questions on the Q&A box. Why does County Fire need a PIO when the county has at least one full-time PIO? Chief, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'll take that question. So County Fire went through the master plan process, and one of the challenges that County Fire had was information being shared to the community and an identification challenge. So a solution to that was adding a PIO, which we recently were able to hire, and that individual is going to help make County Fire its own identity. Even though it's its own agency, a lot of people are confused between Cal Fire and County Fire. I know this is a Pajaro Valley call, so we're kind of going County Fire right now. But he's also going to help with community meetings. In the last month, I'm sure folks that are on this call have been at a few meetings where you've seen PIO Horn. He's integrating out there, making sure that we're communicating better with our communities. And one thing is that the county's PIO is trained in overarching public information, where Michael Horn is specifically trained in fire hazard and emergency response PIO. So he's able to speak our language, understand our language, and then regurgitate that to the community in a way that they can understand it. So being a little bit more transparent and putting information out there. And in today's day and age, information is faster than anything when it gets out there. So having a PIO can help us make sure that we're providing the proper message of notifications to our constituents.
And Chief, can you just for my education, what does PIO stand for?
Public Information Officer.
Thank you. And then the last question before we open up the floor for actual verbal comments. We see how much money is PV Fire and County Fire paying LAFCO for this process. So typically, when LAFCO receives an application, the applicant needs to provide a deposit to LAFCO for any change of organization, and it's based on acreage, or in some cases based on the actual action. In this case, PV Fire, as part of their application back in April of last year, they submitted a formal request to my commission for waiver of that filing fee. My commission, after deliberation, approved the waiver. So to answer your question, there is no fees submitted to LAFCO. So this is another project where LAFCO is not being funded to analyze and move this forward and coordinate with the affected parties. The flyers that were submitted to the residents regarding these two workshops was something that LAFCO assumed the cost. So again, we don't want any change of organization to be deterred because of the expenses associated to it. In other words, if this is the best way to provide the best level service to the residents, I don't want LAFCO costs to be the reason why it's not explored. I want the residents to have all the options on the table to allow them to determine what's best for your protection. And so PV Fire is not submitting any expenses to LAFCO, nor is CAL FIRE or CSA 48. Any flyers or additional costs, that's something that LAFCO is just assuming as part of our services. So that's a response to that last question. At this point, we will entertain any verbal questions or comments. So if you have any questions for the panel, feel free to click on the raise hand button and we'll address your comments at that point. We are at 7:30 exactly, so we still have technically 30 more minutes, but if I don't see any hands raised in the next few seconds, I'll defer to the chair if you want to entertain an adjournment. I do see a hand raised. And it's our supervisor, Kimberly DeSerpa. So I'm going to ask her to unmute herself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, Joe?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I've been watching the proceedings tonight. Thank you very much for answering the community's questions. I think the questions were excellent, raised a lot of very good points. I would just like to let everyone know, including the panel there, that I have been out to the station. I have met with the chief, with the firefighters there, and I just want to thank them for their hard work. I know it's been really hard to only have 2 people staffing a rig that goes out on emergencies that, you know, the Mount Madonna area, the Casterly, like those rural areas, difficult things happen there, and it's must be really difficult to only have 2 people on the rig. The other thing is, you know, we have such a high fire danger with these whipping up with the winds and climate change, et cetera. And if there is a structure fire, it's impossible to do the type of rescue, recovery and rescue needed with only 2 people on the rig. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in to say, thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you to LAFCO for facilitating the process. And depending on what the people of the Pajaro Valley want, I look forward, and I will say that here at the county, we're delighted to add PV Fire to CSA 48. I mean, we would be delighted and happy to support that effort. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. I know your time is limited, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be part of this workshop. So thank you. Chair, I do not see any other requests to address. Oh, we do have an address from, or a request from Mr. Hurtado. I'm going to unmute yourself. You'll have up to 3 minutes to address the panel.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so this reorganization is being justified partly on benefit. Where is the parcel level or APN level analysis that shows how each affected property is being evaluated? Because from what I can find on the LAFCO and the PB Fire websites, residents are not being given a clear APN level breakdown showing which parcels are included, how benefit is being determined, how revenue is being calculated, how service impact is being measured, and whether different property types are being treated differently. So my question is, how can residents meaningfully evaluate whether this proposal benefits them if the public has not been given a clear APN level analysis or parcel specific financial impact?
Thank you, sir. So I'm going to take this opportunity to show the LAFCO website. So if you give me a second, I'm going to share my screen. So here is the LAFCO. Chief, can you just like nod your head if you can see my screen? Okay, I see a thumbs up. So this is the LAFCO website, and at the bottom, you'll see our latest updates. Again, the LAFCO meeting is going to be on the 3rd, but we have a web page dedicated to this reorganization effort. So if you go to this web page, you'll get some background information that we just covered this evening. But more importantly, there are a lot of supporting documents. I mentioned about the February staff report, which includes a comparison of the CSA 48 assessments and the proposed PV Fire assessment. And I'll just show you down here the staff report. If we click on it, please note that these are older numbers. So the proposed benefit assessments for CSA 48 has been updated. But again, this shows you a breakdown. So all you can do is a quick search of your parcel number and you will see that comparison amount. Now, going back to the web page, there is a tentative timeline that we just covered that's accessible in PDF. The SCI benefit assessment study that was referred to this evening is available under PDF. The parcel breakdown that our last speaker mentioned, it is available. So again, if you do a quick search of your parcel number, you will see the proposed cost for each parcel within the PV Fire community under this reorganization. So you can see here the parcel number and the total amount of, again, 376 is the typical cost for a single family home unit. But again, you could refer to this document to see how much exactly is being asked for your particular parcel. As I mentioned, that the latest version of the 5-year analysis is available. This kind of gives you a overview of the proposed revenue streams from CSA 48, how that impacts the PV fire community. We talked about the projected revenues and expenditures, and you actually see the numbers. And again, this is a working document. So as we move forward with the reorganization, we will update this report and all other supporting documents accordingly. But again, this is our attempt to provide information to the residents, because the last speaker is spot on, where residents have to be educated on this proposal. You need to have the information to determine whether or not this is right for your home, and this is something that you support, or at the very least don't oppose. And in order for you to reach that conclusion, you need information. And that's why, again, this is going to be a multi-year process. We want to make sure that not only do we have these discussions this evening, but the same type of conversations happening at the PV Fire board meetings. And we are scheduled to perhaps have another community workshop down the road when we move forward with the process, or if we decide to venture for something else. We will continue to reach out to the community and provide information. So this is something where, if you want the latest news, you can go on the LAFCO website. I believe if you go to the PV Fire website on their homepage, you will have an access to the link that takes you directly to this webpage as well. So with either website you go to, you'll have access to this information, and we'll continue to provide as much information to the public now and going forward, so that you have the information you need about this reorganization. So with that, I'm gonna just double check. I don't see any other hands raised, Chair, so I'll defer to you on any final remarks, or if you want to entertain adjournment for this evening.
I would like to thank all the public who attended. This is really good information for us. It's been a long process, maybe 8 years. So I appreciate it. I also want to shout out to Supervisor Visser for showing up and her kind words. And I want to thank the panelists as well. And do you have anything to add? Anyone? No. Okay, with that, I guess we'll adjourn, and thank you, Mr. Serrano, and also Mr. Emily.
Thank you. So I will stop recording, and then I will have the recording available on this webpage by the end of this week. So if anyone wants to rewatch this or share this with their neighbors, it'll be accessible by the end of this week. So thank you again for everyone that joined us, and we will continue having discussions moving forward. But I also want to thank the panel for your time and effort on this, and we will continue to explore this reorganization effort. So thank you very much.
Good night.